And we're just going to start sitting nice and easy. And a comfortable position. So I like sitting on the block, and I find it easy these days to bring my heels into the groin and get my knees down on the floor. So it gives me a nice big foundation. But certainly when I started yoga, that wasn't possible. So I was just trying to be as comfortable as I can. And if you do cross the ankles and your knees are kind of floating, then just put in blocks underneath the back of the thighs so they've got some support rather than working heavily into the groins from the very beginning can be a bit of a help. If you want to sit sort of more in a kneeling down position, then you can sit on the end of a bolster and just straddle that. Everything works. And then we're just going to sit up nice and tall. Now the wriggling out process is just really to kind of move the flesh around on the sitting bones, and those are actually your hamstrings where they attach, and they tend to get a little bit sort of tight and knotted up around that area. So just a little bit of wriggling always helps. And then we're going to sit up nice and tall and kind of let the breath settle a little bit. Try and relax the jaw, muscles in the neck, running down across the shoulders. I'm going to ask you to just bring one hand onto your heart, and then the opposite hand. So you can just feel your heartbeat through your hands gently. We're going to close our eyes and breathe in and out. Just going to make it a very natural breath. Now, generally, when you say natural breath, everyone focuses on their breath and it becomes less natural. So don't try and build it into something that it doesn't need to be. Just let yourself breathe in, breathe out. See how it feels. Breathing in and sitting upright. Might be the first time you've had a chance to do that today. A little stillness. Now we're just going to breathe in and out again, naturally. But we're going to start to count the breath in, and then we'll count out and see what the difference is. Usually there is. And depending on how quickly you count, you may have got a high number or a low number. But generally, a natural breath, the exhalation is slightly longer. So let's assume that we're breathing in for 3 and exhaling out for 5. And the average of that would be 4. So we're going to try and work out what our average is between the inhale and the exhale. And see if we can breathe in gently for that number and exhale to that number. So just changing and manipulating the breath a little bit. Now we want to be careful that we don't breathe in completely. Try and breathe in 110%. You'll find that you need to burst. Same on the exhale. You draw your belly in so fiercely towards your spine that eventually you'll start to fall forwards. So maybe settle for a 90% in and a 90% out to that average count. And notice whether your heart starts to slow. And we'll gently let the hands come back down as we open the eyes. Slowly untangle the legs. Give them a little shake around. And we're going to make our way up onto all fours. So moving the props out to the side. I'm going to use the bricks to begin with. So they're coming up to the front of the mat with me. And then just coming onto a nice tabletop position. When you're settled, I'm going to take a little breath and draw the right knee in towards the chest and place the foot in line with fingertips, so the knee is generally over top of the ankle. I'm going to move the bricks up a little higher. This is because it just is a comfortable position for me to be in. I place the heel of the hands down, lift the back knee and lengthen the leg away as far as I can, and then let that knee down. Once I feel comfortable on that kneecap, I'm going to take a little breath and let the hips sink down a little bit. Now, generally what happens is the knee travels a little bit further forwards because we're so low to the ground. Now, I can bring the hands onto the floor, but lifting them just draws my chest away from my thigh and it gets easier to breathe. So that's the only reason why I'm coming up. You could, in fact, be really high, or you could even just stay on the fingertips. It's a little bit easier on the heel of the hand, that's for sure. We're letting the hips sink down to the floor. Now I like to lengthen my body out a little bit so that my spine is a little flatter. But you might like to drop the head. Maybe that feels more natural in your neck. Got the weight going down through the arms, transferring through joints rather than using a lot of muscular effort to hold up. High flying dragon, as it's known in the Yin practice. The idea of letting the hips and the groins open. There's a sense of settling towards the ground. And then I'm going to come back onto all fours. So I'm just going to lean back a little bit. Bring the foot back. Take a moment in that tabletop position. Just letting the pelvis and the hips kind of resettle a bit. And when it feels ready, we'll draw the left foot through. Starting with the knee over the ankle, bricks in place. I'll tuck the back knee under and slide the foot away. As much leg length as I can as I settle down. And then let myself sink the hips towards the ground. Another way of making space would be to take the feet a little bit further out to the side. Normally, when you bring your foot through, it's going to come in sort of hip distance apart off of that center line. So taking the foot out a little bit to the side will give you more space if you don't have bricks. Should have probably mentioned that about 4 minutes ago. So apologies. I'm trying to tap into that soft and even breath that we focused on at the beginning. See if that's available to you. So I'm going to come back out of this again to all fours. It doesn't have to be elegant, just needs to be effective, getting you back down on the ground safely. Now I'm going to bring those bricks in, and I'm going to put them on a slightly lower setting because I know where I need to be for my body. And I take them forwards a little bit, you may have noticed. Now this time I'm going to draw that right foot to the outside of the mat. I'm going to lean forwards a little bit so my knee starts to come past the ankle. And I'm going to lay my elbows down onto the blocks. Now you could have a bolster running across the front of the chest, the floor, and that would do the same thing. You might actually find that you need to have the bricks on a slightly higher setting. And allow yourself to settle into that again, just dropping the hips down gently. We don't stay into this side quite so long. I have let the foot on the right side roll out a little bit. So big toe is off the ground, knee is out to the side, just hanging out a little bit. And we'll lift ourselves back out of that. And you won't be surprised to hear when I say we're going to do it to the second side. Again, just taking that little rest in tabletop. Let everything come back into the center. This is quite strong on that sciatic nerve around the SI joint, the sacrum. When you're ready, you'll take the left foot forwards. Ease yourself down. Just to spend a little time moving the bricks and blocks, blankets or bolsters, whatever you're using, to put yourself in a most comfortable place. we'll begin to lift from that. And bring ourselves back onto all fours again. Take a moment. And this time we're going to take the right foot to the outside of the right edge, but make a deliberate turn of the foot out to the side about 45 degrees. I'm going to place the left hand onto the left brick and then allow myself to kind of sink into that as I bring my right hand onto the thigh and then roll the leg out to the side. So I'm encouraging a roll into the side of the foot. Now, some people's feet are going to be flat to the floor, and that's fine. It's just that I've got quite tight, strong ligaments around my ankles, which actually means I haven't got an awful lot of range of movement. So I kind of roll out onto the side of the foot. If that feels comfy, then great. If your foot's flat to the floor, just as great. It's easy as that. Try not to let the weight go down through the arm. So being careful not to let that bottom elbow hyperextend. So it's not quite as simple as dropping down onto the body and hoping it'll do what I need it to do. For a very linear transfer of weight from shoulder through to the wrist. So this is the twisted dragon. The other one was called the low flying dragon. And then we're going to come back onto all fours. Again, taking that moment to just kind of let everything settle again. Now you're ready. Left foot goes forwards. I'm going to turn it out a little bit. It can be quite distinct. Allow yourself to start working out where you want to lean into that right arm. I'm just going to move my right leg a little bit further back just to get the patella a little bit flatter to the floor so it was digging in a little. And then now I'm super comfy. I'll bring the left hand onto the thigh and just let the knee out to the side. Open the body out a little bit. So still trying to let the hips sink down to the floor. Gradually letting the strong muscles around the shoulder release a little bit, so the shoulder is actually getting closer to the ear because my body is dropping closer to the floor. And then we'll slowly bring ourselves back down again. Now I'm going to move the buttocks out of the way. I'll change that for a block. Allow myself to sit down and I'm taking my left heel out towards my right hip. My left knee's pointing forwards and the hips are square. We're just going to come into deer pose. So I'm going to lean out to the left, draw the right foot back, lay the knee down to the floor, pass the shin through the arch of the foot, have the toes point back. At this point, that right hip is quite high, and I'm going to see if I can let that settle down so that I can bring my pelvis into more of a natural alignment. So it's not straining to hold itself up. I'm going to use the left hand to just give myself a little bit of support as well. Now that level of support out there will depend a little bit on how high this right hip is. If the spine is still sort of curving out to the side, you can be straining a little bit to try and get yourself into more of an aligned position. The purpose of the pose is really to let these hips and all the muscles around the belly, the outside and around the lower back, and all the muscles around the hips and the pelvis to work together and relax and soften. So let the shoulders relax a little bit more. And notice that hips start to join in and give a little too. Now we'll slowly release, so lean out to the left, untangle the legs. And we just have that little moment of letting everything free up. And then we'll take it to the second side. Remember to lean out to the right, draw the left foot back, lay the sitting bones down to the floor. Now, when I had initially used to do this pose, I found it impossible to get the second knee down on the ground. I was completely wedged onto one sitting bone. There was no way that the other cheek was even thinking about ever going down to the floor. I'd have to put a brick underneath my hand and push quite considerably to hold myself up. Otherwise, I'd just roll over to the side or have this enormous curve in my spine, which actually, after a few minutes, became almost impossible to breathe into. So you can always lift the floor up a little bit to help, so you can get in a nicer place. And we'll let ourselves release from there. And just a little rolling around the ankles, down the knees to have a little bit of movement. And then we're going to sort of shuffle off the end of the block. So now the sitting bones are definitely on the floor. And I'm lucky enough that my legs can lengthen out enough so the calf and the back of the thighs and the sitting bones are all touching the floor. If that's not the case for you and it's feeling a bit tender underneath the back of the knees, if you roll a blanket up, you can just place that underneath the back of the knees, and that will just give you that little bit of lift. You feel more grounded, less susceptible. And to come into caterpillar pose, so we're going to drop the chin in towards the chest, and then rather than leaning forwards, we'll let ourselves hunch the body. So the chest comes down, shoulders come down, spine rounds, the pelvis tilts back a little bit. I'm going to rest my forearms gently on my thighs, and then breathe into the back of my shoulders. Really try to let those muscles in the neck relax, let the head drop. It will feel like it's generating a lot of heat down the spine. Basically because we're stretching a lot of muscles out. We're compressing the discs on the front edge of the spine, so towards the belly, which means we're opening in the opposite side, giving those discs a little bit of a chance to breathe. And we'll take the breath in, use the hands that press into the floor, just unpeel the spine. And as we do, we'll take the feet out as wide as you naturally can. Still trying to sit on the front edge of the sitting bones. And take a little breath and turn the body so the heart lines up with the right knee. Take the hands about shoulder distance apart. And this time we are going to lean forward. So there's a little bit of a lift up over the thigh and then roll down. You still have a nice rounded spine if that's needed. If the foot rolls out to the side, that's okay. The knee will most likely lift away from the ground. Again, not a problem. You might find that you're not sitting on two sitting bones quite as much as you were before. And we'll just use the hands to bring ourselves back. Turn the body so that it's facing a little bit more forwards. Then we're going to do the whole thing across to the other side. So just easing your way in, letting yourself come down, finding how your body feels. Now, naturally, your body kind of remembers how it felt on the end of the last side, and it's pretty much forgotten what it felt like at the beginning. And this is obviously the beginning on the opposite side. So remember to give yourself a little bit of grace, a little leeway in terms of how it feels and how you react to that feeling. And then it's time to lift again. And this time you might need to use your hands underneath the back of the legs to draw them back in. It's quite a long way. We're going to come down onto our bellies and into Sphinx pose. So just lengthening the legs out, rolling down gently. Allow the feet to be a little wider than the hips, and if you can, the heels roll out and the toes turn in. If that doesn't happen naturally, that's not a problem, but it's a benefit to the lower back if you need sort of areas around there that get a bit tight. And the shoulders just want to be a little forwards, sorry, the elbows want to be just a little forwards of the shoulders. And although I let the shoulders lift up, I do try to draw them or encourage them towards the pelvis a little bit. So rather than rocking up right around the ears, I want to have a little bit of space that I can kind of drop the chest closer to the floor and the shoulders get a nice stretch. I turn the palms up and just let the forearms bear the weight. Try and relax the belly down into the floor. Let the top of your thighs soften. And gradually release your lower back and your glutes in the back of the thighs. And in terms of an experience, it's very like that picture we saw earlier where someone was having a cocktail in a sunny beach somewhere. That's what this feels like in my body. I guess as they said, you can only ever do one yoga pose for the rest of your life. As a yogi, I guess you feel inclined to say, oh, I should be taking my breath and meditation. I think maybe I'm a bad yogi because this is the one I'd go for. So we're going to come down onto our bellies completely. I'm going to bring the hands underneath the chin, make a little rest, put the elbows out to the side. And as I'm doing that, wiggling out the hips and bringing the toes onto the center line. And when I'm ready, I'll slide the right knee out to the side 90 degrees to the body for half frog. Shin runs parallel to the mat, and the toes point out to the side. And turn the head the same direction, and then just rest. I'm slowly going to bring the foot back onto the mat. So keep the knee attached to the ground. Just slide it in to make contact. Then let the foot lengthen out gently. So I keep the knee on the ground. That way I avoid taking extra strain into the spine. Take a little breath here, and then we'll take it out to the second side. So you could say that a half frog becomes a whole frog. And then so I can turn the head again if that feels comfortable. Do allow yourself to wriggle out through the shoulders and get them to be soft. They do link in with the hips. They kind of work as a pair, I've said before. So if, as you've moved from one side to the other, you've kind of added a little bit of tension back into the shoulders, it just makes it that much more difficult to drop the hips down into the ground. We'll have to take advantage of every trick we can muster and find. Now we'll slowly bring that foot back onto the mat. Find the thigh. Slide the leg down. Give the hips a little bit of a shake out. Now we're going to come back up onto the knees. I find the easiest way to do this is to roll onto my right side, draw the knees in gently, and then use the hands to lift up. That way you don't tend to put any extra pressure through the spine. You're going to lift up onto all fours, and then we're going to come into saddle pose. So we're going to take the block, portrait style, down towards the heels a little bit, bring the knees together, allow ourselves to sit gently back. So the sitting bones want to be making contact and the heels to the outside edge of the hips. If you need a little bit more height, you might need to put a brick on top of the block, or maybe the brick by itself would be enough. You can even straddle bolsters as well. I'm going to place the fingertips. So the fingertips on the front of the hip bones and the thumbs are towards the back, elbows out to the side. Sitting up nice and tall. And they're going to let the front hips drop down. So I'm going to kind of lean forwards a little bit and extend my chest up towards the sky and let the elbows roll back. So chin lifts following the heart. So a little bit of a chest lift. Then I'm going to tilt the pelvis backwards and let the spine round and let the shoulders drop a little bit and the chin come down. And then moving through the pelvis slowly, push that down and forwards a little bit. Let the chest lift, roll the shoulders back, tilt the pelvis the opposite way. Now it's not a big movement, as you can probably imagine. we are utilizing saddle or hero's pose and a seated form of cat-cow. Just put a little bit of movement through the vertebrae, the discs, and the muscles of the spine, primarily the ones that look after balance. So if we move too quickly or make this too big a movement, if we exaggerate it, tend to use the bigger muscles that are on the outside of the body rather than the smaller ones that run down the spine, which is what we're trying to tap into. So we just want this to be nice and slow and gentle. And I'm going to set myself back into neutral position rather than gear and bring the fingers to the floor. Take the block out of the way and let myself come back up onto my hands and knees. I'm going to take the block to the front of the mat and just have it on the sort of portrait side, sorry, the landscape side down. I tuck the toes underneath, allow myself to lift the knees away from the floor. So I press back into a down dog. As the legs open out, I'm going to walk the feet about halfway in, keeping the feet about hip distance apart. They come up onto the fingertips and then bring that block back under where I think my shoulders would be when I finally lengthen my chest out. So drawing the belly in a little bit, rolling the spine, the shoulders back, chest forwards, trying to let the legs open out, pressing down through the feet evenly into the floor, keeping the head in line with the rest of the body. So letting those thighs lift up, back of the legs lovely and straight. One more breath. And then as you exhale, just soften the knees a little bit. Allow yourself to bring the hands to the floor. Take the block, just place that behind the heels. Lift the heels off the ground, both fingertips on the floor. Sit back onto that block. Take one hand behind, lengthen the legs out. And sit up tall. And wrap the left foot underneath and out towards the hip. I'm going to come into a seated spinal twist. So I'm going to draw the right leg across. I'm going to draw that pelvis forwards a little bit like we did before. Take the left hand up, rotate across to the right side. Take the right hand just behind the hip. Press into the floor a little bit with the fingertips. Tilt the pelvis forwards, belly drawn in. Relax legs. You can look over the back shoulder if it feels good, or you can let the chin follow the chest, your choice. And we're going to release out of that. Lengthen the legs back out. Cross over to the other side. Draw ourselves into the twist. So you bring the foot in nice and close to the body so the knee can lift up towards the sky. You tilt the pelvis forwards a little bit. Take the right hand up and roll it round into the twist. And we're just using the fingers behind a little bit to help with the lift, rotating around. And we'll release from there. So we're going to come into Shavasana in a moment. I'm going to bring the heels in towards the groin again. Allow myself to lift up, bring the fingertips in front of me, and I'm just going to walk the fingers out, lengthening the body, trying to press the sitting bones back and letting the chest sink towards the floor in a long, flat spine. Let the head come gently down. Now, you may be higher than I am. You might be on the elbows, or you might even be just on the hands. Not a problem. It's more about the shape of your hips and what level of mobility you've got dictates where you actually end up. It should feel like a nice stretch. So if it doesn't, lift yourself back out a little bit till you start to get to that nice spot where it's easy to breathe. Which might even be sitting upright when you come to think of it. Now walk the hands back in. Take a last little breath, and then we'll come down into that Shavasana. So just going to lift off the block. Now, if you do happen to have a bolster and you want to make yourself a little ramp, you can take a brick and a block. And my bolster is very flat and sort of had all the stuffing knocked out of it. So it's the equivalent really of a sort of a thick blanket rolled up many times into a bit of a sausage. That works equally as well. Have a little bit of gap between your bottom and the bolster, and then roll yourself down to the ground using the hands to give yourself a little bit of support, keeping your chin in towards the chest. And you do exactly the same thing if you were rolling right down onto the floor, because you are not fortunate enough to have a bolster or rolled up blanket to hand. Now, it might feel comfortable to stay here with the feet out wide and let the knees knock in, or you might be able to slide the heels out gently to the corner edges of the mat and let the legs roll out, which again, both of those choices are available in lying down completely on the floor without any props. Wherever you find yourself, allow yourself to close those eyes and soften the jaw. And see if you can pick up that soft and even breath that we found at the beginning of the class. And slowly start to stretch the fingers and toes. Also, to take a deeper breath. And stretch gently out. For those lying flat to the floor, draw the heels gently in towards the body and then the knees to the chest and give yourself a little hug. For those on the bolster ramp, draw the heels in towards your body and then slide yourself as gently as you can down to the right side of the mat, easing off. So the people that are still on their back, now roll onto the side as well. I'll stay here for a breath or two. And we'll take a breath in. Everybody uses their hands to press into the floor to lift up. Come into that seated posture. Hopefully you enjoyed a really long, gentle stretch. Thank you for joining me. Bring your hands in towards your heart, closing your eyes as you take a deeper breath in. Beginning to exhale slowly, let the chin drop. Draw the belly to the spine and allow a simple bow to the floor to seal your practice. Take the breath back in, lifting the spine, the head, and the eyes open gently. Namaste. Have a lovely evening. I'll see you all soon. Take care.